This is the BiggerPockets Podcast, show 199.
You're listening to BiggerPockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.
What's going on, everybody? This is Josh Dorkin, host of the BiggerPockets Podcast, here with my co-host, Mr. Brandon Turner.
Hey, how's it going? Well, you didn't say what's up, so it was like weird. I didn't know if I should talk or,
Yeah, know your role, man.
You can't change things up on show 199 of the podcast.
We've been doing this experiment. It's
100.
This is 190. Wow,
this is 199.
Look at that.
This is 199. That's pretty cool. Buddy. In the world of podcasting, we're like old geezers. It's awesome.
Speak for yourself, my friend. Speak for yourself.
Well, what have you been up to? I know you're in a co-working space now because the asbestos thing is still going on.
We are, and I apologize in advance to folks for my personal sound quality during the show. I had to record with a little iPhone headset.
That's right.
But it's great, man. The co-work space is good. We're working out of this space. I'm stuck in a room with Scott Trench here at BiggerPockets, which is an unfortunate situation for me. Actually, Scott's Twitter is Scott at BP. I think it is. What is it, Scott? Scott at BP is his Twitter account. Scott is sitting next to me with a pair of crutches and a busted up foot. So can everybody please jump on Twitter and send some well wishes to Scott for his injured foot? For those of you watching the YouTube video, he's got his foot up in my face. But you guys leave Scott a tweet. Scott's an integral member here at BiggerPockets, and we all feel bad. So give him a big fat aww.
So
on Twitter, would you?
True story. Scott Trench actually found he began working here at BiggerPockets because of the BiggerPockets podcast. He actually listened to our show and ended up coming on. So if you are listening to the show and you're like, it would be a lot of fun to work with Josh Dorkin, which I don't know who says that, but if you are like that and you are looking for a job, go to BiggerPockets.com/jobs and there are some jobs there. And that is your quick tip for today.
Nice. Really quickly. You asked me how things are going.
Yeah.
Things are great. I mean, it's been chaotic. It's been nutty. As we talked about last show, we're in this co-work space. Somebody burglarized our former office that we can't access due to asbestos.
That was probably Scott Trench.
Well, it was in a tent.
How did he hurt his foot?
Wait, did you hurt your foot, Scott? Well,
burglarizing.
What?
I think we just discovered a mystery. We solved the mystery here on the podcast. Now we know.
I think the odds of that are so close to zero, it's not even funny. Anyway, guys, this is show 199 of the BiggerPockets Podcast. You can check out the show notes at BiggerPockets.com/show 199. That's BiggerPockets.com/show 199. And of course, if you are not yet a subscriber, please do subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever else you prefer to listen to the show. Leave us a rating and review. It certainly helps us in the rankings. All right, man. We've got a great guest today.
We do.
Let's do this.
All right.
Today's guest, guys, is Houssein Al-Eidan. Houssein is a 25-year-old real estate investor who has already cobbled together 25 units. Quite an impressive feat.
It is. And he's doing it obviously in a little bit of different strategy than maybe you or I did. But it's interesting just to hear how other people, in different parts of the country with different backgrounds, how they build their businesses. You guys will love this interview with Houssein today. So listen up.
That's great. Let's bring him on. Let's get to the show and let's see what he's all about. Houssein, welcome to the show, man. It's good to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, this should be fun. And I know you've listened to a lot of episodes of the show. So can you tell us real quickly, how did you find BiggerPockets? I'm curious.
So I'm big on, one of my learning forms is, visual. So I love watching videos, and one of the first things that I ran into was, a show called Flip and Flop, which kind of really inspired me. And then from there, I really searched, YouTube, kind of seeing where can I still get, that content, either from an audio source or a video source. And that's when I stumbled across literally BiggerPockets podcast. And ever since, I've been listening to them, nonstop. So
that's awesome.
Definitely a great source of learning.
And I have to admit, I did stage that question in here because I wanted you to say that, so I could remind our listeners that you can also watch these videos on YouTube. We put every podcast episode on YouTube. So you like that? Yeah, you like that?
Yes.
All right.
Hey, Houssein. All right. So you're in the St. Louis market.
Josh, didn't you live there for a while?
That was I went to school there. Yeah,
you invested there, and you were that was your hometown.
I went to WashU. I invested there. Without St. Louis, there would be no BiggerPockets. So, but yeah, man. So let's talk about how you got started. I know you worked for like Big Four accounting firm. Like, why would somebody like that get into real estate? I mean, it seems like a good job, good way to kind of make a living. How'd you get this thing going?
Yeah, so essentially, just some background. So I actually grew up in Kuwait, made my way over to St. Louis from a school that I had an affiliation with. And
wait, so you came from Kuwait, and you said, I could go anywhere in America, and I'm going to go to St. Louis. What the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And, life takes you in interesting paths, and for some reason right now I gravitated towards St. Louis, and it's kind of kept me here for a greater cause. And so the school that I went to, so I did my freshman year and sophomore years at a school that I went to in Kuwait, and they actually had an affiliation with the University of Missouri St. Louis, and so transferring over to St. Louis made most sense. And then so from there I got my bachelor's, master's, and in accounting, and finally my CPA. And, from the get-go, I really wanted to, work in Big Four accounting as a auditor. And so, that's what I'm doing now. And, after learning about different types of investments and different vehicles, I really wanted to, I knew that, just working wouldn't necessarily be enough to kind of sustain a longer term wealth plan, and as far as being able to provide for yourself and your family, beyond just a regular salary. And so I looked into stocks and different types of investments, and for the most part, it wasn't, what I was looking for. And, one day I was sitting down with a friend, and we watched, a few shows on, flip and flop, and I was just really inspired by the concept of, being able to use real estate as a vehicle to kind of drive long-term wealth. And a lot of times, the shows portray, great profits, and obviously a lot of times that may not be the case, but it definitely got me thinking. And then from there, I went into looking into the St. Louis market, looking into ways I could get involved.
That's awesome. I was actually just watching an episode of Flip and Flop yesterday, and like they made $189,000 on a flip, and I was like, well, I mean, like that's the number that they put out there anyway. Who knows how many expenses they had? But I was just like, man, like I need to get flipping in Southern California or something, because I made 20 grand on a flip, and I'm like, woo. So but that said, learning from those shows, whether they're realistic or not, I mean, people argue that point all day. They are extremely effective for inspiring people to jump into real esate. I mean, that's why I'm in this. Great. Yeah, inspiration's fantastic, and so I did the same thing as you did. We were inspired by that and jumped in. So why don't we talk about?
Though
go
potentially
ahead. Dangerous, right? I mean, maybe some people jump in without
a lot
knowledge.
of the shows don't give you all the details. They don't tell you a lot, and so people jump in not really knowing. I will say that to know what they don't need to know.
I will say I was impressed yesterday when I was watching the show. They actually did say, they were like, well, these are what the comps are, which I thought they did a pretty good job of explaining that. And then they said, with sales expenses and closing costs and the realtor fees, this is how much profit we'll make. And I was like, oh, they actually included, like the old flipping shows never did that. They were just like, we bought it for $500,000, we sold it for $700,000, we made $200,000. I was like, no, you didn't. But this one was all right.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest takeaway from these shows, as realistic as they could be or unrealistic they could be, and listening to the BiggerPockets podcast, you start recognizing patterns and trends. And those are the type of scenarios that you want to constantly, look into. And then from there, you'll be able to build that confidence as far as saying, okay, this is what you do when you encounter this situation, or if you encounter a similar situation, you kind of seen it before, you've heard it before, And so it helps you make better decisions.
Yeah,
Sure.
for sure. Well, all right. So what was your first deal then? How did you, what did that very first thing look like?
So essentially from there, auctions is a big source of what Flip and Flop use as far as, finding deals. Sometimes they're on the MLS, but a lot of times they'll go to live auctions. So I did a simple search. I wanted to see if there's any live auctions here in St. Louis. And so after doing a simple Google search, I stumbled across a website called auction.com. And from there, kind of wanted to see what is in the St. Louis market, and literally searched the area of St. Louis and came across a whole bunch of houses. And to my advantage, houses here in the St. Louis market are relatively cheaper than in other areas. And so it was kind of a low risk, high reward opportunity. And so the first deal was literally, I think I bought it it's like a duplex for less than $5,000, but required at least, 50 to 60. But this is one where, it was a nightmare purchase in the sense of everything that goes wrong in a house, this house has. I'm talking about, mold. I'm talking about, when it rains, there's water coming in from the back wall because tuck pointing was poor. So, it was kind of a scary first purchase, given that, sight unseen. But at the same time, now that I'm a lot more experienced and have seen a lot more scenarios and going back to that house, there's a better plan moving forward as to how to get it to completion. And then, similarly, there was a similar purchase that I performed in which it was a condo. And luckily, once again, it was a condo that was purchased ultimately for $20,000. And it was actually it was actually, for most of the properties on auction.com are foreclosures, but this condo specifically still had the original tenant in there. And so I had to learn quickly about, the eviction process and how we could, best proceed. And to my luck, the tenant that was living there wanted to, when we went to court, he actually wanted to renew. And so all of a sudden, that person just paid, rent right off the bat versus, having to go in and rehab it and incur all those expenses. So it was really a win-win situation, given that, you're paying a minimal amount compared to, other purchases that you get and still get those competitive rates, in which, right now it's close to, $750. So when you think of rates of return, it's probably one of my best, investment opportunities that I was able to pursue.
Now, was that, when you say the tenant was there, was it the actual owner who got foreclosed on and then it turned to a tenant because the eviction, the whole foreclosure process, or was he an actual tenant living there before?
Yeah, good question. And just to clarify that, so what I meant by tenant, he was actually the owner. Okay. And in turn turned into a tenant. And
that worked out for you? Because I've heard horror stories of that not working out, but that worked out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was someone, he was, very well in tune with the area. He works in the area. And so he was the type of person that wants to stick to where he lived. And it was just a win-win situation where he was okay and able to pay. And so, we just came to an agreement that we would just start a lease and work with him on that.
Okay.
Hey, Houssein, so that second purchase, that condo became a rental. The first one, which you also picked up at the auction, did you flip that? What did you end up doing with that, and what did the numbers look like?
So with that one, when I first started, I tried to, that was, my first purchase. And as you guys probably have, been through and listened to different people talk about, the first purchase may not be always the most ideal. And so that's where I really took a lot of hard lessons as far as trying to understand, okay, how can I get this thing going? Am I going to hire a, well-known company that knows how to rehab properties? Am I going to go with someone on Craigslist? Am I going to go on, referral? So there was a lot of troubleshooting, and due to my lack of experience at the time, I went through a lot of experiences and trying to understand how to best approach it. And so for a while, and to this day, I kind of have it on hold simply because as I went through that condo purchase, I went through other similar purchases with condos and found a lot more success. And so kind of my strategy is if I did find a similar property that, was really run down but still had a high return value, that was more of buy and hold and leave it when the market kind of saturates and there aren't as many good opportunities. At that point, I would go back and focus on those, there's other similar properties which I'm kind of focusing on. And my main, strategy is focus on those properties that are easily or the most closest to being complete. And that way those could, be quickly ready for rental. And then from there, get those activated. And then when times are down and the market isn't as good or whatever the reason may be, cash reasons or whatnot, at that point, I could focus on those.
Okay. So you bought, sorry, go ahead.
I got most of it. I didn't really necessarily get an answer
it sounds like you bought it for $5,000 and you just left it, right? You bought it for $5,000, left it, and you're going to deal with it in the future, right?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. So you bought it just from an auction for almost nothing.
$5,000.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Correct.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So now,
and this was in St. Louis, not Detroit. I mean, St. Louis is the other Detroit, but
Yeah,
and that's very interesting because I know, when you look at the best places to invest in, I feel like a lot of times St. Louis is, underrated when it comes to that. And I feel like it's definitely very comparable to the Detroit and Cleveland market.
Sure.
And so with the right level of marketing, the right level of attention, investors could find a lot of success in the St. Louis market.
There's a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely.
Have you considered just like selling that duplex? I mean, like see if you get $10,000 for somebody, like somebody here on the BiggerPockets podcast want a duplex for $10,000. You know what I mean? Like, could you just sell that thing for a little bit and make some money? Or do you think there'll be longer term profits by holding onto it and just waiting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, to get a little margin off that sale, that's always an option. Really, my strategy has been always buy and hold, simply because, initially, obviously, with flip and flop, their main thing is flipping it. And with that strategy, to me, it's more like a gamble. You never know. You can really profit the one time. The next time you do it, you may not get as much. But as far as long-term benefit and rates of return, it could have a tremendous success rate. So let's say worst case scenario, I end up rehabbing it and overall costs turn out to be close to 50 or 75 grand. Or let's say less than 100 grand. And I'm able to rent out both sides, let's say Section 8 or similar type tenants. At that point, the rates of return still justify it being a good purchase.
That makes sense. So how many total deals have you done now then?
So right now, 25.
Really? And when did you start this? When was the first one?
So I literally started last May of 2015, so a little over a year now.
Wow. So 25 deals your first year.
Holy smokes.
I mean, is that 25 units or 25 like individual properties? How many of those are multifamilies? And like, what's the kind of breakdown look like in your portfolio?
Sure. So so that's comprised of, 1 6-unit, a combination of duplexes, and then condos, and then 1 commercial property are kind of the four categories of real estate types. And right now, which is actually the property that I'm staying at, which you can classify as a 5th type, is a house along with 6 acres of lot, which is kind of a unique opportunity given the potential of what you could do with 6 acres. So those are kind of the 5 categories of properties that I invested in so far.
And you're
what do you?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what are you doing with them? Because so Flip or Flop is a show on flipping. That first property you didn't flip and you didn't quite flop. You just
bought.
Yes. The second the condo became a rental. Have you flipped or are you just doing buy and holds?
Yeah. So mainly, really solely buy and hold. So all the condos that I have been, very successful as far as purchasing at a lower price point being defined as less than 25,000. And usually the cost to get those ready for rental is between 5 and 10 grand, given that I'm able to leverage some contractors that are usually charging cheaper rates than most, typical contractors, and being able to leverage bulk buying at the respective department stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, and coming out with a ready product. And so the rentals are mainly rented out usually within a few months, and the single families that I have are in a similar situation. And there's some Airbnb properties as well that I'm managing. And so the ones that are in the city, mainly rural areas, those are the duplexes that are really, less than 10,000. Those are mainly just essentially waiting for the time to get those up to par as far as rehabbing them. But a lot of those that are in the rural areas I've been mainly sitting on those.
Okay, so let's get some clarification here. Condos, you're paying less than $25K for them. You're spending $5 to $10K to get those ready to rent. What are those renting out for?
So, great question. And this is kind of an interesting point so luckily these are in areas in which I've been able to rent them, and I would say higher rent desirable areas. And, the one that's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, that rents around $1,000. So, and then the range within those condos is, I would say, $850 and $1,200. So given that same,
you're putting in 30 grand, give or take, 30 to 35 grand, and getting $850 a month on those to $1,000.
Correct.
That's awesome.
Holy smokes.
Those are good numbers.
Yeah, and so what kind of, and are these in tougher neighborhoods, or are these, you said you're getting them at auction, so are they, A class, B class, C class, kind of where do they fall in that range?
So so you have the city in St. Louis, and you have the county, and so these are mainly in St. Louis County, and they're usually in, I wouldn't say less desirable area as far as crime or not. They're, from a crime perspective, their crime is usually low, and usually the population is that of a working class, I would say low income to low medium income level. And I think for the most part they've been good as far as the tenants that I've been getting.
That's great. Okay, so we got that on the condos. Those numbers are spectacular. The duplex is under 10K. I'm assuming you're also getting those at auction.
Yeah, and just a clarity on the condos. So there's also the factor of HOA fees. So obviously you have to factor in that cost, and but for the most part that's the biggest expense. And those HOA fees have ranged so far from $150 to $250. So even with the HOA fees, there's still a decent amount of return.
Screaming deals, yeah. Well, so okay, so back to the duplexes. The duplexes you're paying under 10K for at auction. So am I correct in hearing that you're buying these because they're so bloody cheap? It sounds like, and you just want to get them in your pocket. You're not even necessarily jumping on the renovation on all these units. It's, let me get as many, I'm paraphrasing, and please correct me. So let me get as many of these things in my pocket as possible, and I'll get to the ones I get to when I get to them. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is fair. And I think for the most part, these properties are, definitely in more perceived, crime areas, and definitely have a stigma attached to them. So there is that risk, and on my end, trying to figure out how could I understand the best way to market those and kind of the target audience that will be involved, because obviously a lot of times there's a stigma of obviously crime being a huge factor, and once people hear where they're at, they may be not attracted at all. And then there's also the factor of not being able to the fear of it, they're being torn up, or tenants not caring enough about them. And so I think that's kind of a major reason why they're at that price point. But Obviously, when the time is right, as far as the market saturating and having a strategic plan to get those ready, it's a matter of just going full force and getting those to tenant ready.
Cool. So let me ask you one last question. I'll defer to Brandon for a few minutes because he looks sad.
I always look sad. Come on.
Yeah. Well, you look where you live. What's the breakdown then I mean, you had how many total units it was? It was 25.
25. Mm-hmm.
Of those 25, how many units are just kind of sitting on the sidelines and have yet to be renovated and need to be renovated? So, yeah.
So I would say it's probably close to 60%. 60% is on the renovation side, and 40% is in the category where it's ready and able to, be activated and generate profit.
Cool. So let me dive in, and Big Daddy Josh is about to throw down here. So you got a full-time job, right? You're working in your accounting. You've been scooping up properties, but you got a whole lot of them sitting that have yet to be renovated. What's the plan? At what point do you kind of slow the roll on the buy side and get to those properties? Because your risk goes up, right? Obviously, the more of these properties that you have that aren't filled, that need a lot of work, there's higher risk to those properties for you as an investor. So is it, hey, I'm going to just buy up as many as I can for the next till December or till March, and then I'm going to put a stop 100% and then plow everything and get everything fixed by June? I mean, surely you have some kind of game plan. What exactly is it?
So luckily, one of my recent properties that I purchased in the rural areas was actually very successful in the sense of, it was under that $5,000 category, and Zillow has it at 70,000 approximately market value, and luckily it's actually in a nicer street in this rural neighborhood, along with just overall better perception of the community. And so given that I mentioned earlier that I like to focus on those that are more near to completion, and now that I've had a little over a year under my belt, I actually approached that. And I think one of the biggest things is not to be intimidated by the bigger picture and the various components that will go into rehabbing these houses, but kind of breaking it down into smaller, more manageable pieces and approaching it that way. So on this one house that we're currently actually working on in the city, we decided to focus, since it's a duplex, on the lower level, get that finished off, get that rented out, and then from there focusing on the second unit within that duplex. And that way it can be ready and the market could be generated. And I think there's already interest from the neighbor who's indicated that there's a older couple that's interested in moving in there. And so when you have that word of mouth and the interest starts developing, that's how you can kickstart that process. So it's more by taking it step by step and trusting the process.
That makes sense.
Cool.
That makes sense. Would you say you're pretty much close to saying, I'm done buying, now all we're gonna do is rehab, or are you just gonna keep buying and see how big you can get the portfolio? While make hay while the sun is shining.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think it just really depends on the opportunity. And one of the things that, I like to focus on is deals that are at lower price points but yield higher rates of return. So to the extent that those come about, those are the ones that I focus on. And so I guess that's kind of my niche and my strategy is, I don't really usually buy ready-made, turnkey properties, because usually those are closer to market rates and may not be as advantageous from a rate of return perspective. And so to the extent that a good opportunity pops up, I'll definitely, engage that opportunity. But it just really depends on the market. what's going on.
Okay. And what about funding? How are you doing? I'm assuming, are you paying cash for all these because they're so low, or are you trying to get loans on them?
Yeah. So, one thing that I've been able to do is, the first house that I bought was through, conventional loan. And then recently, one of the houses that I'm renting out as an Airbnb, given that it was, higher price point than what I usually buy, this one was close to, $110. So, I would say if it's anything over 100, I usually try to find loans as far as, working with a bank. But luckily, through listening to BiggerPockets and some of the takeaways that you guys shared, seller financing actually has been a successful means of me, acquiring a few properties. Other than that, for some of the lower purchases, it's been a combination of personal savings along with, my mother helping me fund a few of the deals kind of as a passive business partner.
Okay. All right, cool. So seller financing, let's dig into that a little bit. First of all, what does that mean for those people who have never heard that term before? And how did you put that together, a seller finance deal? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, the way it works is you have to understand, okay, you're interested in an opportunity to buy something. What are your different sources? So you can do a cash purchase, you can work with a bank, you can have a family member help out with you, or you can engage with the selling party, whether that's the individual that's selling it or the agent, and assessing if their willingness to essentially sell you the property with a down payment usually, and then with an agreement that you would pay them monthly payments, usually at an interest, in order to incentivize them to sell you the property. And usually it's advantageous to the seller to do that if, one, they may be getting a higher purchase price, and two, if they don't really need the cash right away, in which they'll be making usually a higher interest rate than they would otherwise in other conventional investment forms.
Okay. Yeah. So you're buying these properties, or a couple of them anyway, you said, where the seller holds the note. You pay them every month. You're just like they're the bank. How do you approach that with a seller? I mean, how did that even come up? How did you say, hey, will you carry the contract on this? Or is that just what you did?
Yeah. So it really depends on the opportunity. So a lot of times when you're driving around and noticing different signs, which we call BiggerPockets, driving for dollars. You can assess, is it an agent that's selling it, or is it a seller? So with this specific deal, in particular to this unit that I bought, the 6 acres, along with the house, it was posted by the owner. And he had asked for $400K, as far as, the purchase price. And so, obviously I didn't pay that. So essentially it's meeting up with the person and understanding, what is it they're trying to do? So in this specific case, it was an older man. He was, looking to retire and wanted to get regular income every month with, an interest rate associated with that. And so once you understand what the seller's motivation is, from there, you could customize a plan as far as, asking them, hey, are you willing to entertain seller financing? And then, they would think about it, consult with their family. And then if they trust you, if you can present, good moral character, can back it up with, financials and how you can fund such a deal, at that point, you can proceed to the next step and sign a contract.
Very cool. Yeah. And so you never know what a person's motivation is until you dig in, have that conversation, talk with them. And sometimes, especially maybe this is ageist, but older people tend to want to do seller financing a little bit more because they like the monthly income. What are they going to do? They get this big chunk of, 300, 400 grand. And they're like, okay, well now I got to pay taxes on this. And then that just dwindles down to nothing. But if I carry a note for 30 years, now I got income for the next 30 years. I'll be 100 before I have to worry about, money again. And so, just understanding where the person's at, what their needs are, what they want, can really open up the door. When I was doing research for the book on investing with no and low money down, which people can get at biggerpockets.com/no money, I found out that 30% of homes in America are owned free and clear. 30% of all the houses out there are owned free. Huge number. And so and not that there are ways to do seller financing even if they have a mortgage, but we're not going to get into that, subject to and whatever. But just basic seller financing, they should have the home paid off. And so people say, well, that's hard to find. Well, it's not really. A third of all houses out there are paid off. So it's just about discovering the person's true motivation, what they want, what's going to make them happy. And some sellers have never even considered it until you bring it up to them. You say, hey, what were we going to do with this money anyway? Well, I don't know. It's going to stick it in the bank. Oh, the bank's only going to pay you, 0.5%. What if you could earn 7%? Oh, well, let's talk about that. And then all of a sudden, you have that conversation going. So I love that. That's very cool.
Yeah,
it's great.
And it's, you have to also just be confident. The worst that could happen is the seller could just say no.
Yeah.
But until, you'll be surprised. When I heard it on BiggerPockets, I'm like, no, that can't be possible. I'm sure, they say it on the show. But until you try it and you gauge kind of different responses, you'll be amazed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true.
Yep.
That's cool. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you mentioned Airbnb, and I wanted to go there.
That's where I was going, man.
Great minds.
Steal
all right.
my thunder.
All right. So this is something that I'm getting into for the first time this week. One of my units vacated. I said, you know what? Everyone on the podcast here keeps talking about Airbnb, renting their properties out that way. I'm going to do it. I'm going to turn one of mine into Airbnb. So selfishly, as usual, I'm going to quiz you a little bit. What are you doing?
By the way, really quickly,
yeah.
I believe it was last week, maybe a week and a half ago, like New York. I believe, I don't know if it was New York State or New York City.
They're cracking down.
Airbnb, and basically, I think I'm paraphrasing this correctly. Essentially, they're making Airbnb not even let you list in those areas. So before it was, I don't know that it was legal or not, and then you could still list, but now I believe Airbnb is stopping allowing you to even list a property in those areas, which I may know a person or two who was making a pretty good income doing that. And they had transformed their long-term rentals to Airbnb. They ran it exceptionally well, had fantastic ratings, made a great income, and serviced all those people who needed a short-term rental. And now, apparently the hotel lobby wins. And so these guys are all going to be in a lot of trouble. So, the one thing with Airbnb that I would just warn people is you got to keep a real tight look on what's going on in your area, because, if you're going in with the strategy of, hey, I'm going to build this business, wrap it around Airbnb or VRBO, short-term rentals, whatever it is, they tweak the laws, you could be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so let's hear about your strategy and what you're doing with that. You said you paid $110 for that property?
Yeah, Josh, and just to kind of add to that, in addition to just the laws, also be aware of, the condominium associations, as well as the housing community that you're in, as far as, how many tenants you're allowed to, occupy the house at any given time. So definitely I look at, the higher level laws, but as well as the specific association and community laws as well. Yeah. So this Airbnb. So I look at Airbnb, obviously, in this case, is utilization is always a beautiful thing. So in case of Brandon, he saw an opportunity where one of his, units vacated, and he wants to explore Airbnb. And so this is a house that I bought close to my college, the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And as part of, my initiative to give back to the community and turn it into either a fraternity or, a similar student housing. And so when I approached the school to explore the opportunity, if they'd like to collaborate or utilize such housing, given, that they kind of want to promote their school-owned units, that idea kind of took a step back. And so the net plan B was, okay, what are my other options? And given that this is kind of on on, let's say, the less desirable street. So it's all one street, but a lot of times you have like a good street and then a bad street. And that's kind of common in St. Louis, although it's within a mile from the school. I figured that people would find it less desirable to live in that area. Hence, the demand or the rent potential would be lower. And so at that point, I've heard about Airbnb, and I said, let me give it a try. It's close to the airport, it's close to the school. In St. Louis, for the most part, you can get around anywhere within 30 minutes. Let me list it. It's a nice sized house in which right now I have 5 bedrooms in it, 2 bathrooms, and let's see what happens. And literally within the first day of listing, there was I think it was like the number 1 listing as far as views goes, and people were just off the hook as far as wanting to rent it out, because I think a big part of it is the size and the number of bedrooms, and people find that more affordable. And so I definitely invested. I think the biggest thing once you have an Airbnb is furniture, and making sure you have the adequate number of amenities that typical guests would expect. And I think it kind of gets into a different field as far as, okay, we're used to just focusing on houses. Now we have to kind of accommodate these other needs. And so that's kind of been very successful. And really the difference between having an Airbnb property versus a regular property is volume of transactions and the amount of attention that you need to give, which hence you're getting compensated by higher daily rates of return than if you were to just have someone pay a monthly rate. And what I mean by higher volume is now that instead of having a tenant reach out to you maybe one or twice a month, whether it's, hey, the rent is ready, or I have an issue with my bathroom, all of a sudden you're getting constant inquiries, people asking you questions about the listing. You're having people ask you, where to park, or, where can I find this? How do you work with this? And all these other questions. So you're getting constant inquiries and as well as questions, but also the attention that you need to give as far as cleaning every time someone switches out, as well as any issues that may come up with problematic issues as far as, maybe a water heater goes down or other matters.
So what this unit that you paid $110 that you've got an Airbnb, what do you rent that out for per day?
So on average, it's $100 per day, but and so on average, I've been renting out for a few months now, and it averages approximately $2,000 in income. Obviously you got to factor out costs such as cleaning, supplies, as well as other factors, which usually I would say come to anywhere from $300 to $400. So still a decent amount of rate of return. And in addition to that daily rate, if the number of guests increase, you could add an additional guest fee to factor in, a higher daily rate. So, I currently have it set as any additional guest after 4 guests pays an additional $25 per day that they stay. So, all of a sudden that daily rate will multiply, over the number of additional guests, and you can make significantly more amounts. And with this property specifically, that's advantageous, especially when groups come in, whether it's for a convention, a wedding, or meetings. And so that's kind of been a successful point as far as larger groups are attracted to the specific house property.
So cool. Are you self-managing these then? I'm assuming you're doing all the work yourself, yeah?
So, given that, obviously I do have a full-time job and obligations, what I've been really successful at doing is, building a team as far as, 2 to 3 contractors that I trust, and really just delegating a lot of those tasks to. So really, and given that I travel significantly during the weeks, I've been trying to empower them as much as possible so that they could, understand the next steps and at times make executive decisions that I would have otherwise elected them to. And so I've been trying to have them help out as much as possible. And obviously, to the extent that I'm available at night times after work or on weekends, I'll be part of the various needs that they have and getting them squared out for the next week.
Are you talking about contractors as in independent contractors, or contractors as in like actual contractors?
Yeah, so right now I've been working with a lot of independent contractors, people that have their own schedule and are able to, collaborate with me on some of the projects and housing needs that services that I would like to deliver to the various tenants and guests.
Got it. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, Airbnb, you talked about all the work that goes in to service the guest. I mean, this is not, you work for a half hour, an hour to get the lease signed with the new tenant and you're done. I mean, this is constant, daily. I mean, if you're renting what it sounds like about 20 days a month, that's 20 different people with lots of different queries 20 times a month. I mean, that's a considerable amount of time that needs to be spent to answer their questions on top of the cleaning and all the other servicing. So, you've got to build some system in there to kind of deal with that, which is what it sounds like you've done through a bunch of independent contractors.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times if you enjoy what you do and you're passionate, you can really make the most out of it and enjoy the process. So that's kind of my big philosophy, enjoy the process. And it's really no difference. Like, if I get an inquiry during the day and I have a meeting going on or other obligations, Airbnb has a policy where as long as you reply within 24 hours, you're fine. And they actually rate you on that. If you don't respond within 24 hours, they ding you for that. And they have this how fast you respond. And so as long as you respond within 24 hours, it's good. But honestly, it's really, like you said, finding, the right time to respond. And it's how you use your time is, I think, a big part. If I'm using Airbnb, it's, as if someone's texting you or you're following up on things, and so it's really finding the best practices to get that in a good spot.
Nice. Cool. Hey, last question before fire round for me is, you had talked about a commercial property. Can you tell us what that is and what the plan is, what you do, or, what are you trying to do?
Yeah, so essentially this was a laundromat, which actually is right next to, it's a vacant laundromat at the time, it's actually right next to this Airbnb property. And so one of the perks of the Airbnb property is that they can use that vacant land parking space temporarily, but it's also on a very busy street. And so that's kind of, I would say, I would probably put that laundromat in the category of, holding on to it until the right time comes to either advertise it to a potential business that may be interested in leasing that space, or selling it to a franchise or similar type business. And so it has a decent amount of space, great location, and once again, it was purchased for less than $100K. And I think given that, and that was actually on also another seller financing deal, and so it's one of those, just buy them and focus on the right time to get them ready for show, and from there strike a deal.
Nice. Really quickly, not to call you out, but I would be doing a disservice to newbies if I wasn't. I would say, if you are a brand new investor, that, look, you work for a big four, money is obviously not as big a concern as it would be for some other people. I caution newbies who hear this and say, hey, well, yeah, it's a great idea. Let me go and buy a bunch of properties for cheap and kind of get back to them when I have the time. I would caution them against the strategy. I think it sounds like it's working for you, and that's great. But for, I would encourage those folks to, pick up the property, make that decision, do what you're going to do with it, start getting the cash flow from it, and then work on the next one. Obviously, you have some wiggle room, which is great. It works for you. It works for your strategy. I just, I want to caution the newer folks to be careful. This strategy requires you to have the capacity to hold on to the property, no cash coming in and having payments going out. And so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, now knowing what I know now that I didn't know before, and let's say, I'm starting off with, less of funding and other resources. I say Airbnb is a great way to kickstart, your real estate career, and just getting a feel of how you feel like it's you'd like being a landlord. I feel like it's almost like a crash course, having tenants come in and seeing how you deal with them, and you're still generating a decent amount of money on your own property. Let's say you go out of town, you can try it out and it works out. And obviously there's different ways, seller financing, if you can, make it work with a seller, as well as, house hacking is also a great way to go about it. So there's definitely different ways that, newer investors that don't want to necessarily invest a lot of their own money to find, other means of leveraging the different strategies and methods that are available to finance such deals.
Yeah. And I think it just shows too that there's different strategies for different people based on what your situation is. And so if I'm starting out and I have zero money at all and I'm working minimum wage, I'm not going to go buy 25 properties and, have half of them empty, to wait for later. But if I have a good stable job and I can afford it and I have a bigger plan for that, then that might be a fantastic strategy. It just shows that everybody, again, you got to figure out what works for you in your situation and accomplishes your long-term goals. So very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, let's shift gears and head over to the world famous fire round.
It's time for the fire round.
All right. Let's get to this fire round. Number one, my first question of the fire round. Let me pull it up here. For a millennial who works full time and they're trying to invest, what should they commit to? What should they commit their time to doing when starting out? So somebody who's in the 20s, maybe young 30s, wanting to get started, what should they spend their time doing?
Yeah, so I think the big thing at such an age is discovery. Really trying to find your passion and what you feel like you like doing. And then from there, I think it really becomes, can you turn this into something that can give you a nice sustainable living? And if that becomes real estate, then definitely, listen to the BP podcast, listen to the different shows and start exploring the different venues, understand your market. And from there, let that curiosity take you into more precise steps as to what you could do to, enter the game and, be successful in utilizing that passion.
Cool. All right, next question. I've got no money, but I want to start investing. What do I do?
Yeah, so definitely, understand the different opportunities you have. So, one option is to work with an agency or other investors that have done it and understand how they could, get you involved as far as, maybe you could do it through labor, and as far as, maybe there could be a deal that's struck in which, through your work services, you could, obtain a property, or understanding, seller financing, and, given that they could come in and fund, a deal for you with the ability to pay them back on a periodic basis.
Cool. All right. Number 3. Should I look for, I'm a young investor. They said they're 21. Should I start looking for a single family or multifamily property?
So I think the biggest thing is understanding, what's in your area, and understanding that there's not necessarily one size fits all. What may make sense for a single family may not make sense so much for a multifamily. So understanding what you can turn it into, what the best potential is, and understanding the numbers. Does it make more sense to where you are to rent out a single family, or do the numbers make more sense with the multifamily? So I think, being open, being flexible, and understanding the different opportunities and what's the best venue to pursue given what's available to you at that given time.
Perfect.
Cool.
I love that answer.
All right. Last question. What do you like best about investing in condos? Nice open-ended one.
Yeah, so condos are amazing in the sense of your risk of things going wrong tremendously decrease. So literally all you have to worry about is what's contained within those, 4 walls of the condo. So, drywall, plumbing, electric, cosmetic matters such as flooring, the kitchen cabinets, whatnot. Whereas, other forms of real estate investment, you have to worry about the roofing, the foundation, among other factors. So that's why I say if I buy a condo and, sight unseen, the risk of, if you can figure out what it would cost to replace everything that's inside, that's the maximum risk you're exposed to. And so I think that's kind of the biggest reason why condos are advantageous, assuming, the association is healthy and they're not in any legal or financial trouble. I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits of investing in condos.
Makes sense. All right. Well, hey, let's shift gears for a final time and head over to the world famous Four. All right. These are the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. And I know you've heard over 100 episodes of our show, you said. So you've heard these before. Number 1.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I apologize. What is your favorite real estate related book?
So it's by Chris Gray. It's called The Effortless Empire. And it's actually, he's a UK investor and just talks about great ways of investing in the various, investment types and, the benefits of that as relates to other forms of investment. So it was definitely a book that I enjoyed, and I would say probably the first real estate book that I read in its entirety. And it's an easy read, 125 pages. So definitely recommend it. It's it's available free online with a simple Google search.
Oh, cool.
Cool. Favorite business book?
So this is one that I'm actually in the process of completing, but it's how to influence people and win friends. And so I think that's kind of one that I've been in the process of completing, and really trying to understand the people aspect and how to best bring the best out of people, and managing that relationship with folks.
Cool. And I think it's how to win friends and influence people, right? It's the other way around, maybe.
Correct. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Cool. Hobbies. What do you do for fun outside of working and your real estate and traveling around for work, which I'm sure is exciting?
Yeah. So honestly, right now, real estate is my fun. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but I mean, I really enjoy doing real estate. So literally, that's kind of been my fun. A lot of people for fun maybe will like to go to the mall to shop. So I like to go to Home Depot or Lowe's to shop. That's kind of my fun, and learning about the different things and items they need. But I think other than that, hopefully once that is in a good spot, I definitely want to get more involved in, hiking as well as other outdoorsy activity when the right time comes. So I think that's definitely something that I'm interested in doing.
Sweet.
Cool. All right. My last question of the day. What do you believe sets apart successful real estate investors from all those who give up, they fail, or they just never get started?
So I think the biggest thing is staying true to yourself, and just making sure you follow through in what you're trying to do and achieve. And so, if you come into real estate with the mindset that, I just want to make a lot of money, a lot of times that may not be the best thing. But if you actually look at the, let's say, unspoken benefits of real estate, you're providing a good living situation for someone. A lot of times you're influencing the community. So really understanding what it is that's driving you in real estate, and staying true to that, and going into it for the right reasons.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice. That's
like
awesome.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, Houssein, listen, man, we really do appreciate you coming in, sharing your story. It's definitely a different path than we've heard from, I think, any of the previous. This is show 199, 198 shows or so. But that's to Brandon's point. That's, I think, what's so fascinating about real estate is, there is not any one path. What works for you is not necessarily what's going to work for somebody else. And so, as we love to harp on every time, find your own paths, guys. Listen to these shows, get inspired, see what makes sense for you, and go out and make your own decisions on what you want to do and how you want to move forward. But Houssein, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We really do appreciate it, and lots of luck going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for the time, and look forward to listening to the next 200th series of shows.
Awesome.
So do we.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Thanks for saying. See you later.
Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye.
All right, guys, that was Houssein Al-Eidan. Big thanks to Houssein again for coming on the show. That was interesting, man. I mean, definitely a different take.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's more of the let me get as many units as I can as quickly as I can, and then
work out the details later.
Yeah, figure it out later. Which again, I know we talked about this during the show. I think it works for him, and I think it potentially works for other people. I would not recommend it for somebody who's brand spanking new.
Yeah.
I think you want to get your feet wet. I think you want to really get a little more experience and turn over your units more quickly and rehab them and get them ready instead of kind of sitting on unfinished. But again, it seems to work for him. That's great. I mean, as we talk about all the time, there's not a single path for any one person. And it's great to hear all the different stories and all the different ways people are going about doing things.
It is. Yeah. And again, like, yeah, when he, if you're somebody who has no money at all and you go out and get a bank loan and then don't fill the property, well, then you got negative cash flow. But for him, it sounds like, first of all, the prices are a lot lower.
He's got a great job.
He's got a great job. He can back that up. And so like, he knows like that, again, that's why it works for him. And I think that's cool. I love to hear stories like that. So
yep. Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right, well, let's get out of here.
Well, let's do it. Before we do, you guys, please do jump on Twitter and leave a message for Mr. Scott Trench, Scott at BP, and give him some sympathy, give him some oohs and ahs, and we hope you feel better, and you're the best, Scott, and tweet him so that for the rest of his life, Scott gets tweets about this episode and his ridiculously large foot.
All right.
With that, guys, we will see you next week on show 200 of the Bigger Pockets podcast. I know I'm extremely excited about it.
It's going to
be great. Brandon, why don't you take us out of here, man?
Hey, thanks. All right. For the Bigger Pockets podcast, my name is Brandon, and this here is Josh. And we're signing off.
You're listening to Bigger Pockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.